So, reflections on the big march, and I think it's safe to say that it was of epic proportions. I don't think that would be an exaggeration. And numbers, I want to talk about numbers first, because there's obviously the complete fake stream media or mainstream media talking about 100,000, 150,000. That is a gross underestimate. Calculations I did, and again I try to keep it very much on the conservative side, I worked out the length of the route, which was 2.2 miles from Blackfriars right the way down to, I think it's the Earl Haig Memorial on Whitehall. And that's 2.2 miles, average width of the roads 25 metres, and obviously some are 15 metres wide, some are 30, 35 metres wide, and allowing for, and you can work this out yourselves, allowing for 7 people per square metre. That brings it in 690,000 people on that area at any one time. But of course that's not the full story, because the reality is there were people moving through that area not just once, but it was a mass movement of people for probably 3 or 4 hours. And that wasn't just the start and finish of the march. Obviously there was people joining on, people getting redirected up onto the south side embankment, people probably going to pubs, getting sick of the overcrowding and so on and so forth. And then of course loads of people were pushed north embankment on up to Trafalgar Square, up to other parts of the city, because of the sheer weight of numbers of the crowd. So I would say, to say 1 million people in London for that march is not an overestimation. I'd say that could be actually on the march at any one time. We could say close to 750,000 people, but actually in town for the march, I think saying 1 million people would be fair. Because again, what I don't want to do is over-egg the pudding, but at the same time, I'm not going to allow the fake stream media to lie about the extent of and the numbers of people that were actually in London. And of course, the other thing we've got to remember about that is that there would have been a lot of people. This is what always happens in the march. A lot of people come to London for the march. They go to the pub and they stay in the pub. It's just the way English people are. They start having a bit of crack, they start having a bit of a laugh and a joke. By the way, crack means something totally different in Northern Ireland to what it means in England and America, but it means banter, okay? Start having a bit of banter, a few pints, the banter's good, and they stay there. So goodness knows how many pubs were filled with patriots that were just there for the atmosphere. So that's the first thing, the controversy of the numbers. I think that's a fair estimate. Between 750,000 and 1 million people, I think, would be a fair claim. Anything less than that, I think, is being a little bit either pessimistic or disingenuous. Okay. Now the next thing is policing. Now, when I got to Stansted Airport on Friday, I was met by 6 police officers who identify themselves as the counter-terrorist branch. I came off the plane, there was a few people in front of me getting checked for ID, which I thought, well, this is strange, doesn't normally happen on an internal flight. I walked up to a police officer and he said to me, have you got your passport? I went, no, don't need my passport, it's a domestic flight. At which point he looked a little bit taken aback, so there's a couple of things I'm wondering about this. And I said to him, is there some sort of problem? He said, I'm from counter-terrorism, Richard, and we want to talk to you. I thought, well, this is interesting, because first of all, I'm not a terrorist. I've never been in a terrorist group in my life. Secondly, sorry, I was playing a bit. Secondly, the the timing of it was very, very unusual as well, because obviously this is literally the day before the biggest patriotic rally in the UK. And the cop says to me, he says, "Oh, we want to talk to you." I says, "Well, no disrespect. You can't hold me because I'm not on an international flight. So as far as I'm aware, the legislation is if you're coming off an international flight, you can be held for up to 6 hours without charge, without being arrested and questioned. But I'm not on an international flight. I'm basically on a domestic flight from Belfast to London. So that's the first thing." At which point he said, "Oh, it would be in your best interest to speak to us." I said, "Sorry, I really don't think it would be. You know, I've got a lot to do. I'm very busy. I don't have time to talk to you." And then I said to him, I says, "Am I under arrest?" "No, you're not being arrested." "Okay, well then, I'm going to go on my way. Please don't waste my time. I'm very busy. I've got to go." And I walked off. Now, there's one or two things was going on there, right? It could just be sheer incompetence. They could have thought that I was coming on an international flight and thought, okay, we'll grab this guy because we know we can hold him for 6 hours. We'll get his phone. We'll either get him for not giving up his phone details, and that means he'll have, sorry mate, that means he'll have a potential terrorism charge hanging over him, or we'll get his phone and we'll get all the data out of it, because that's what they're doing. Now, even if that was the case, if that's what they were trying to do, that's sinister in itself, because anyone who knows me knows that I've never ever been involved in anything that would be even vaguely resembling terrorism. No charges, no arrests, never done it, not my thing. So why, if that's the case, why are they holding people who they know are not terrorists? They said this to Tommy. They actually said this to Tommy. Tommy was talking about it this morning. They said, Tommy said, "We know you're not a terrorist, but basically we just want to get your data and we want to get your phone." And I thought, well, that's that's a very, very interesting way of doing things. Just going to go this way, get away from that chainsaw. So that's one of the possibilities, that it was a phishing exercise. The other possibility is, were they trying to recruit me as an agent? Now, they didn't get that far because obviously I didn't go with them. But if I'd have gone with them, what would my position have been? If I'd have said, okay, I'll come with you and talk to you, what would my position have been? Would I have been held? Would I have been arrested? What would have happened? And I think that's another question, and it comes down to civil liberties. It comes down to abuse of powers. Terrorism legislation is draconian for a reason, that terrorism is such a heinous and dreadful act. If someone's planning on carrying out some sort of mass casualty attack, wherever it is throughout the UK, well, that's quite rightly, the security services should have powers to prevent that and powers to stop people using violence for political means, which is what terrorism is. But we're not doing that. We're doing the opposite. We're using our free speech and our democratic rights to make political change. Now, that is not terrorism. And nobody that's doing that should be questioned or held or talked to under terrorism legislation. And I think that is a massive civil rights issue. And I think it's something that 100% needs to be looked at and needs to be dealt with. And I don't know how we go about that, because the problem is all the human rights lawyers are lefty, so they'll probably agree with people like me and Tommy and Danny being arrested and held when they know for a fact that we're innocent and we haven't done anything wrong. But it's another feather in the cap. If they can find Tommy guilty under a terrorism offence, obviously that has massive implications for Tommy. If they'd have got me and managed to detain me, it would have had massive implications for me as well. So put that to one side. I walked away, phoned my mate who was waiting in the car for me. I said, "Ian, brother, get the Bentley revved up. The counter-terror guys have just tried to grab me." And I've never got out of an airport as quick in my life. I mean, I just legged it out of there. Okay, so The next day was the demo day. Now this shows the difference, and I've got to pay credit where credit's due. I'm not anti-police. I'm certainly anti-political policing. I think political policing is wrong, it's sinister, it shouldn't happen, and that's what I believe was happening on the Friday with the counter-terror police. But on the Saturday, got to the demonstration, everything was formed up perfectly. The stewards done a great job getting a line of stewards across Stamford Street, was it? Whatever street it was anyway. I think it was Stamford Street. They got a line of stewards across Stamford Street, so everything was under control. Met the police there, met the police liaison, met the gold commander, had a quick chat, everyone seemed happy, and that was that. There's that flipping chainsaw again. So I just was chatting to people, seeing what was going on, and the police came to me and said, look, we've got a problem down at Blackfriars. The people aren't moving for us. Can you possibly go down there and start them moving? Because one of the things that people don't understand about what was happening on the day, and this is where I am going to be very fair to the police, right? There's some people some officers did behave very badly, and we'll talk about that. But on the whole, and certainly the officers we'd been dealing with, the team that had basically been put on our job, and these are all very experienced public order officers, and basically I think they behaved very well and actually did the job very well. The problem that we had on the 13th, as we talked about numbers, was nobody was expecting these numbers. I think the police were expecting us to get maybe 100, 110,000 maximum, right? The fact that we had possibly up to 1 million people in the area and on the march, I think it took everybody by surprise. Took me by surprise when I saw the crowds getting bigger and bigger. You know, you're going, what do we do about this? So I went down to Blackfriars, and there's a crowd of, I don't know, only 20,000 people on the bridge, not moving. Now that causes a problem because obviously people are coming in through Blackfriars. So again, you've got this whole idea of crowds getting too big, people getting hurt, people getting crushed, and them not going where they should be going, because obviously what we wanted to do was go into Stamford Street. So I went down Blackfriars, met the I think it was a bronze commander or whatever it was down there, and basically he said, look, I need these people moving up onto Stamford Street. It's blocking people getting out of the station. There's too many people in the area. That's fine. So fortunately, there was a guy I knew his mate, a guy called Craig from the south of England. I'm not sure what exactly calls a group, but really good lads, and they were sitting there playing some music, just really enjoying the moment, and they had a big massive sound system. The other lad that I know from that group's called Lee, and I've been chatting to Lee, funnily enough, about how he could help, because he had quite a few lads with him. I think he had about 150, 200 lads with him, and what I'd asked Lee to do was say, if you get near to the front of the crowd on Stamford Street, what I want you to do is stop people going forward of you, so that we're in a situation where that line of stewards, the sort of the thin blue line, so to speak, or the thin green line, doesn't get broken, and we can keep control of the crowd. But anyway, this lad Craig, give me the mic. He says, go on Richard, do your stuff. Made a little speech to G everybody up, to keep everybody positive. And they said, right guys, the ones in front of me, please start moving towards Stamford Street. The ones behind me, stay where you are. And what it did was it managed to split up that crowd into 2 blocks. So there was no danger of people getting crushed. There was no danger of anything going wrong. And it just spread the crowd out, which is what we were trying to do the whole time. But obviously, when I seen that down the bottom end of Stamford Street, people coming over Blackfriars Bridge, I realised we had a massive, massive crowd. And when I got back up to Waterloo Road at the roundabout there, again it was getting busier and busier and busier. So what we had to do, and again we held off on doing it, we tried to hold the line at the top of Stamford Street as long as we could. What we then did was said, right, well, this is getting overrun. I mean, the cops, the gold commander there came up to me and he says, Richard, he says, we've lost the roundabout. He says, we can't control these people. He says, I have no authority. And this was interesting. He said, I have no authority to start pushing these people back, because basically the conditions don't apply, because the conditions have been set aside because once you reach a critical mass of people, you can't blame the people for not being where they should be. So he had no right to enforce anything on those people and push them out of the way. So basically, he said, it's down to you. You need to find a way of controlling this crowd. And what we were in danger of was having the line of stewards swamped on the front and on the back with people that basically we had no control over. Because obviously if they're behind the stewards line, the stewards are actually holding the vast mass of people back. So with people coming from the north of Waterloo Bridge, with people coming from the south, Waterloo Road, and that start point was unsustainable. So what we did was we put another line of stewards to the south of the roundabout to stop people moving forward of that, and it worked to some extent. Obviously some people just blasted on and went ahead anyway, but to a good extent we managed to have a form-up point behind that line of stewards. Then we brought the other line of stewards round the roundabout, and once we got it round the roundabout, we had a situation where we had control and we got them under the bridge. And obviously the point about that bridge is it's quite tight, so you didn't need as many stewards to hold that line because everybody was going to funnel through there. And there was also a couple of underpasses just up from there where people could have come through the underpasses and if people were worried about getting a crush, they could have come through the underpass, and once they got through the underpass, that would have been them basically through and home and dry. And so we held there until Tommy and his team got there, and what Tommy's lot did, they just literally fought their way through the crowd and then broke through the lines. And it worked. They could have come through the underpass, but it worked them going through the crowd as well. And the thing is, we did it safely, and we still maintained control of that mass of people. And again, the reason that's important is when you get to Whitehall, if you just got a mob piling into Whitehall with no control, that's extremely problematic, because basically there's nobody there to slow things down, to keep that group under control. So you're in a situation, once you get there, it's just every man for himself. And obviously we wanted to prevent that. And this feeds into the whole question with the policing. And I'll go on to what happened at Whitehall in a minute, but because the police had underestimated the size of the crowd, we'd actually told them it was going to be massive. And this is the only criticism I've got of the police. And it's not really their fault, because they didn't know what we knew. We knew everybody was going, but they didn't know that. So because they'd underestimated the size of the crowd, the plan really broke down once Whitehall filled up. And that's what I'm going to talk about in a minute. So once Whitehall filled up, I talked about this to the police on several occasions on the Teams calls, and I said, guys, look, if we have a crowd of the size I think we're going to get, what do we do to stop there being a crush in Whitehall? And I think the consensus was, you're not going to have a crowd that big. I went, okay, but what if it does? And of course it did. We had an absolutely massive crowd. And to be fair to the police, once the gold commander for that area, gold or bronze or whatever it was, for that area, got to Whitehall, obviously I would imagine talking to the helicopter as well. The helicopter can see exactly what's going on with the crowd, how dense it's getting. Once he realised there was a danger of a crush, straight away, probably I was at the platform maybe 10, 20 minutes, and they asked me to make an announcement on the PA to stop people coming into Whitehall. Problem was, the sound at the far end screen wasn't loud enough for people that were coming into the mouth of Whitehall to hear what I was saying. So people kept piling in. So I went down with the police liaison to meet the cop that had the concerns about this, and I'm glad he had concerns about it, because if he hadn't have highlighted it and me and the police liaison guy hadn't gone down there, it could have gone very, very badly wrong. So we had to intervene straight away. What you couldn't do is just send a line of coppers charging in there, because if they'd done that, obviously people would have been, what's going on here? We're being kettled, we're being treated unfairly, and that could have led to another problem. It could have led to disorder, and then a crush as a result of the disorder. So what we had to do was get stewards into that line across Whitehall. The problem is, there weren't any stewards in the area, because obviously stewards are doing different things all over the march, right? So all we had was 10 stewards covering Downing Street, because the police had asked us specifically to put 10 stewards across Downing Street to stop anybody doing anything silly, right? Because obviously Downing Street, because everybody loves Keir Starmer so much, is a massive bone of contention at the minute, and could be a sort of a focal point of any anger. So we 10 stewards there. So I grabbed the 10 stewards, and it's fair play to the stewards. One of the stewards says, no, I've been told to stay here, you know, under all circumstances. I can't move from this position, which I thought was great, because again, taking his job very, very seriously. I said, look guys, I says, this supersedes this. We're in a situation where there could be a crowd crush. In fact, there was already a bit of a crush going on. I says, we need to get there and start thinning that crowd out and pushing people back into Parliament Square. And those 10 stewards came with me. We met the police officer who was leading the operation in Whitehall, and he told us basically what we needed to do, and we got police officers and stewards working together to actually stop people going down Whitehall and actually asking people to push back into Parliament Square, and it worked. We're there, probably took us about an hour to do that, but it thinned that crowd out in Whitehall, and we'll never know if there would have been a really bad crush and if people had been killed or injured. But when you see how tight it was and you see how many people were potentially going in there, I personally believe that the action those stewards took, and those police officers, without a shadow of doubt, saved people's lives. And really, this is where it comes on to, did the police do a good job or a bad job? Well, personally, I think the changing the plan, which we had to do as well, we had to change a start point, we had to put stewards across Whitehall, we had to intervene in Blackfriars, we had to intervene in some other places as well. I think the way the police handled that and reacted was actually very, very good, because they became very flexible in what they were doing. And what they started doing was, because Parliament Square and Whitehall was getting so busy and it was very difficult to stop people going into Whitehall, believe you me, they then started pushing people down Embankment, which is why they got near the left, which is why they got to Trafalgar Square, and it wasn't to force a confrontation with the left, it was to stop a crush in Whitehall. Now, that brings another question, and this is a question that lies squarely at the feet of the GLA, of Westminster City Council, and all those stakeholders that were involved in trying to frustrate this demonstration. Because what we initially wanted was Parliament Square. In fact, no, what we initially wanted was Trafalgar Square again, right? Now, with that many people, we would have filled Trafalgar Square probably 6 times over. Easy, right? But there's a lot of streets around Trafalgar Square that you can fill. There's a lot of places for people to get away. The problem with Whitehall was people were literally hemmed in. So there was fencing down each side, there was fencing around the monuments, there was fencing around the screens, there was fencing at the front. It could have been extremely, extremely dangerous. So I think the decision the police made to stop people getting back, to stop people getting into Parliament Square in big numbers was absolutely the right decision. You could have had more people in Parliament Square for sure, but the problem was keeping them from going down Whitehall. So I think that was a good call, without a shadow of a doubt. I know this sounds all very technical stuff, but it's really important, because when people are making comments and saying, oh, well, the police deliberately did this, that and the other, when I've seen the police do stuff that's wrong, which I saw at the last event, I think the guy that was in overall charge of the event at the very beginning threatened to start nicking some of our football lads that were standing on the side of the road doing nothing wrong. I called that out, did a video on it, got the video out there. But I think, and he was like one of the top guys, he wasn't just a constable getting over enthusiastic, and we'll talk about that as well in a minute. But they made the right decision. I think they absolutely made the right decision on this day. Now, what happened later, I think it was problematic. Certainly with the riot cops being too hasty to get the batons out, and the problem that happened near where the back of our stage was sorted out with Danny Tomo. Can I name the other guys? I don't know if they want the names out there. A couple of the security guys, I'll not put the names out there just in case they don't want their names put out there. But really good lads. got involved and started calming things down. I got a megaphone, helped calm things down as well, and that sorted the problem out. But before that, the riot cops were, they don't listen because they're that psyched up. They think we're the enemy. They're banging their shields. They're banging, they're lashing out at people with truncheons. It's not cool. It's not the way to do it. And we've had this for years, and I think there needs to be a change in the way that's done. And I've got a few ideas on how that can be done. I think if you have more liaison officers with more faces, so in other words, people that are recognised in the movement, and you have them with half a dozen liaison officers just around that march at some point. Okay, it means for the people that with the liaison officers, it's you're not going to probably have as good a day as you would if you were just able to enjoy the march, because believe you me, you work your backside off when you're trying to sort things out. But I think it would certainly tone down those confrontations. If a lad with that's known, me or Danny or whoever goes into a situation and starts calming it down, people do listen to us, right? And that's why we do it. We want to enjoy the event as much as anybody else, but if there's something happening that's going to cause violence, we've been very clear we don't want any violence on any of this. So that's what happened with those confrontations. I wasn't there at the Trafalgar Square one, so I can't comment on that, or the far end of Whitehall. But it looked pretty much similar, that it could have been calmed down if there'd been some sensible heads there that said, look, we're not here for a row, we're not here for a fight, we're not here to go and get to the lefties. We can stand here and just chill out or whatever. But again, I don't know what happened there, but I believe the police started trying to push the Patriots back, which probably wasn't a good idea either. But all those things, when you're in direct contact with the police liaison and they can get direct contact to the commanders, whether they're in the ops room or whether they're in different parts of the event, it can be extremely, extremely helpful. So the other thing is, I'm going to finish on this about the event. There was an amazing calmness to the event. And I'm going to say something, and a lot of people might not agree with this. I don't really care, to be honest with you. I believe that God was there. And God's everywhere all the time, I know that, right? But I believe that the presence of God was all over that meeting, all over that event. And I believe that God himself was having a calming influence. I had people praying that there wouldn't be a crowd crush. Pastor Chris Wickland. I grabbed hold of Chris by the arm and says, Chris, I says, brother, you need to pray that, I told him what's happening. I says, there's a potential crush. I says, I need you to pray. We've got no resources to sort it out. I need you to pray. And I believe, and to a certain extent, having 1 million people in the centre of London and nothing going wrong is miraculous. It is a miracle. And I think we've got to give glory to God. And of course, the gospel was preached. People were very receptive to taking gospel tracts. People have started reading them. What is happening in our movement? Man, it's a mini revival, okay? And I want to see it as a major revival. There's a lot of people becoming Christians, a lot of people finding their feet as Christians. And I think that's an amazing thing. So overall, worrying policing when I landed at Stansted, what the heck business do the counter-terrorist branch have of speaking to me? None whatsoever. On the day, numbers were completely overwhelming for everybody. When we did that, I think we had 40 stewards. When I got to the line where the stewards were, I started deputising stewards. Anyone who's a veteran, I was saying put a steward's vest on. Anyone who's a lad I knew, put a steward's vest. But even young Bob got deputised as a steward, So the whole thing, I think, was it could have been an absolute disaster, to be honest with you, and instead it was an absolute massive success. And I think we've got to be grateful to the Metropolitan Police when they did well. We've got to criticise them when they did badly, and also we've got to realise that God was in control of that whole situation and kept it peaceful and kept people safe. And I think we all had an absolutely fantastic day, and it'll be a day we'll remember for the rest of our lives. I mean, man, I thought October 2017 was big. We've that one there that we've just had, just wow, And again, everybody that came, if you came to the event, thank you so much for coming. The next one, I'm guessing, will be next year sometime. It's going to be even bigger, even better, even louder, and hopefully, If we get there, I'm not going to say anything about locations, but hopefully it'll be a good long march and a good location, and everyone will be safe. And you know, Sola Deo Gloria, glory to God alone. See you all soon.